Hey, what is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. First off, I just want to apologize for being away for so long. I was a bit busy with studies and work. So for today's video, we will be building this TV show search. So basically, we're going to be using, sorry if you can hear the weather, we're going to be using this TV Maze API. So I would have links to all of the documentation in the description below. So we're going to build this React application. It basically allows us to search for a TV show and get information back. So if I were to type CSI like this and I were to click on one of them, it would take me to an individual page. It would tell me what categories of genre it is, what is the status of the series, it's already ended, the rating, and then official site. This one currently does not have a site, and then some description of this series, and then just a picture. So it's really simple, but it's a nice project to warm up all of your React basics. So in the about page, I made like a little list of what we'll be learning or what we'll be using in this application today. So we're going to be using React, and we're going to use the create React app CLI command, and then we're just going to do some basic, all of this, everything you see in this application is just basic CSS and HTML or JSX, whatever. I'm not using any CSS framework like Bootstrap or Material UI, I coded everything from scratch, and this just helps you to warm up all of your skills overall. We'll be using Axios to make our AJAX request to this API. Then we'll be working with an API, so this is something neat. This API does not need any like authentication or keys, which just makes it easier for beginners and initially to just get into it. We'll be using React Router to route between all of the different pages like this. And then we'll be using the context API. So I'll go over how I set up my context in React to get all of the global state ready. And then finally we will be deploying this application to Netlify. So this is going to be probably a long video, but I hope you stick with me and enjoy it. And yeah, so let's quickly go through. I'm just going to refresh it. So it starts off like this. And then we can literally type in anything here, Game of Thrones. And it also has like a little loader, like you can see over there. Here it actually has an official site. So all of this data comes from the API, from this API over here. So if I were to click on this, it opens a new tab and it takes us to the Game of Thrones website. So I hope this excites you, and let's dive right into it. Okay, so before we get started with the actual coding, I just want to show you guys what this API gives us and what exactly we're going to be using. So one of the endpoints, so I'll leave the description to this down below so you can follow along if you'd like. So at the endpoints, we're going to be using the search endpoint and the, which one, somewhere down here, the shows endpoint. So the search one allows us to search for any term. It gives us a query we can pass through, and I'm just going to take this endpoint and paste it in Postman. So you can do this in your browser as well, but Postman just gives us a better format so we can see exactly. Make a GET request and send, and we can see we get back an array of objects. So each one of these objects contains a show that has a query string or name that contains girls. So if we scroll down, we can see here the name, it's girls. If we close this document and go to the next one, this is capital letter girls, and let's see, good girls, and so forth. So each one of these documents contains the data under the show field. So we have some score. I'm not sure what exactly the score is, but then we have the show document. This contains the show's ID, the URL for the show, the name, the type, language, genre, and a few other fields we will be using. So now that we have a little bit of an idea, here is images, you can see the images, a little bit of an idea what this API returns to us, we can dive right into the coding part of this project. Okay, so now that we're done checking out the API, we can get started with the project. So I'm gonna go jump into Visual Studio Code or whatever text editor you're using. I'm going to navigate to my desktop, then I'm going to create a new folder called React_project. Then I'm going to navigate into cd React_project, and then I'm going to open it with Visual Studio Code, just like this. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run the npx command, npx create-react-app, and then dot. Okay, so once this is done, I'll get back to you. Okay, so now we're done with that. I'm just going to run our server now, npm start. Check it out, it should just be the normal React loading screen. Just like this. I'm just going to do a few folder cleanups. I'm going to remove the app.css, the app.test, the logo.svg, and the setup test.js. Okay, so this would crash our program. So it's because of inside of the app.js we are still looking for the logo and the app.css. We can remove that, and then we can remove this entire header part inside of the div, just like that, and we can say React app, and we can remove this class name over here. You can save that, and you can see because of React 17 we do not need to import React anymore. I'm just going to change this into a functional component using arrow functions, just like this. Okay, and if we save that and go back to our screen, we can reload, and then we can see React app being logged from here. So inside of our index.css, all of our CSS is going to come inside of index.css. Going to remove everything from there. Okay, I'm just going to set up a few basic CSS boilerplate things. I'm going to remove all margin. So the wild character, removing all margin and all padding, just like this. And then inside of the body, I'm going to set the font family equal to Arial. For now, this should be fine. Let's go back here. We can see that is Arial. Just going to open the terminal like this, and we can see that's correct. Okay, so now I'm going to build out the structure I'm looking for in my app.js. So we're going to be needing a navbar, and then we're going to need a home page route. So we're going to need a route that loads the home page. We're going to need something that loads the about page. About page route. And then we're going to need that single show detail page. Details page route. Okay, so this would be the kind of structure of our application. We had the navbar, we have the home page, and inside of the home page we'll have different components, and inside of the about we'll load that list, and then the single page for just listing the single show details. Okay, so I like to start with my routing, as this just gets the flow of my application going. So before I do that, for the routing for these specific pages, I like to add them in some container div. So this just helps me structure the page's width size. So I'm going to give this a class name of container, and inside of our index.js we will add some styling to this container class. So we can say container and we'll set that equal to, we'll give it a max width. If you ever used Bootstrap before, this is really similar to the container. We'll say a max width of 1170 pixels and a margin of auto, so it just centers it to the middle, just like this. Okay, so with this different pages, so the navbar will be a component, and the home page, the about page, and the single detail page will be pages. So let me explain that by creating the different folders. So in our source folder, I'm going to create two different folders. The first one is components, and then again in the source folder, we're going to create pages. So we have two different folders. In the pages folder, we're going to create a home page, an about page, and a single page. And inside of the components, we'll have things like the navbar, the list items, and so forth. So let's build it up from here. So let's create the navbar component inside of the components folder. We create a new file called navbar.js. And once again, I'm going to use this RAFCE snippet from the React ES6, this extension right over here, ES7 React Redux GraphQL snippets. So I'm just going to say RAFCE, which stands for React Arrow Function Component Export. So once again, we don't have to import React at the top anymore. I'm going to give this a semantic nav tag and give it a class name of navbar, just like this. And then inside of the navbar, I'm just going to log for now, this is the navbar. So we can see all of the routing and components in the most basic form. So here is our navbar component. So now we have to import our navbar component at the top of our app.js file. So I like to make a comment and say this is my components. So all of the things below this comes from my components folder. So I'm going to say import navbar from navigating to the components and navbar. And instead of the comment right over here, I'm just going to place my navbar component in right over there. And if I were to save this and go back to my web page, I can see that this is the navbar being loaded at the top. So now I want to do the different pages. So this requires routing because I want the home page route, I want the about page route, and the single page route. So I'm going to quickly stop my server and then install the package called React Router DOM. So we're going to say npm I react router DOM, just like that. We hit enter and this will download. So once this is done, we can clear the terminal, and now we can import right at the top. I like to separate my different imports at the top from everything at the top. I import is packages I downloaded or installed, and everything below that with named comments is things that I created. So we're going to say import something from React Router DOM, just like this. And the things we're going to extract from this package is the browser router, which wraps our entire application to be able to route different routes. And we're going to rename this to router. It's just shorter and easier to understand then. And then we're going to extract the switch and the route default exports or named exports. So right now our application does not allow any routing, so this main div of the app component, I'm going to change this to the router we just imported from up here. And the reason both of these tags, the starting and ending tag, changed at the same time is once again an extension that changes both the tags at the same time. Okay, so now I want to wrap all of my different routes in a switch. So I'm going to say the switch component, just like this. And then each one of these routes we're going to need to create components for. So let's quickly do that. Inside of our pages folder, I'm going to create the homepage.js. I'm going to create the about page.js, and I'm going to create the single page.js. So the single page is obviously for, like we saw in the demo, when we click on a specific TV show, it goes to the more detailed page of that specific show. So inside of the home page file, I'm just going to run the RAFCE snippet again, remove this. I'm going to rename this directly, name to homepage, and I'm just going to place inside here, this is the homepage, just so that we can have an idea of what's going on. And inside of the about page, RAFCE again, excuse me, and then I'm going to say class name is equal to about page, just like this. And inside of the div, this is the about page. You can remove the import of React. It doesn't actually really matter, but we'll do that any case. And then for the last page, the single page, we're going to say RAFCE again, remove that from the top, and the div, we're going to give a class name of single page and say this is the single page. And now that we have created all three of these pages, we can bring them into the app file. So I'm going to say a comment and call it pages, so I know everything below this is imported from the pages. So import home page from into the pages folder, the home page, and then we're going to import the about page from the pages folder into the about page file, and then the last one is import the single page from pages single page, just like that. So now we have imported all of our pages into our app file. Now we want to create the different routes to route them to this different component pages. So I'm going to remove these comments right here, and inside of our switch statement, I'm going to use the route component. 3 of them to be exact. So in the first one, I'm going to say exact path, which just specifies the slash route. So exact just means it's looking for exactly slash, so nothing after it like that. So we're looking for exactly the slash, and then we want to render a component when we get to that route, and this will be the home page. And then for the about page, we can say exact path. We actually don't need to say exact here, but I just like being exact when it comes to this. And component, and this will be the about page. And then the last one will be the single page. This just does not have to be exact, because this will differ from post or from TV show to TV show we select. Okay, so we can say path equals slash single show slash and then some ID. So this would be a placeholder for a variable called ID, and this will render the single page just like this. So if we were to save this and rerun our server, we can see that our routing is now functioning. So let's cross our fingers. So we are currently loading in the slash page, and you can see it's this part of this div has like a little gap here, and this is due to the container we created, and we wrapped all of our pages with this container. So it just pushes it away from the edge. Okay, so this is the home page, and if we go to /about, we can see it's switching to this is the about page, And then the last one is single show with some ID, and we can see this is the single page. So now we are done with our routing. So let's continue by creating the navbar. Okay, so inside of my navbar component, I am going to start building my navbar. So I'm going to remove this and start by adding a div. And this div I'm going to give the class name of navbar. And then inside of this div, I'm going to once again place the container, the div container. So it just pushes the branding or the logo of the div and the different links in the div in the same width as the rest of the screen. So we're going to say container. So we have the main navbar, so that the entire color of the navbar fills the entire screen, and then we just wrap the links and the branding inside of this container. So in here we'll have the semantic navbar tag, and then I will create the brand. So the brand is going to be a h3, and this h3 will contain a icon as well as the link to go back to the home page. So for that we're going to need to bring in from React Router DOM the link component. So you can say import something from React Router DOM, and we can bring in the link component. So inside of this h3 we'll have a link that links to, so it takes in a property, the to, and this will link us back to the home page. So if you remember from our app, if we route to the slash page, it goes to our home page. So on navbar's logo, if we click on the logo, it would redirect to the home page. So here we would like to add an icon, and in order to add an icon we have to add FontAwesome's CDN to our index.html file. So I'm going to go to my browser, and here I'm going to say cdn.js.com. So here you can just get different CDNs and add it to your project. So I'm going to type in here FontAwesome and search, and I want this one right over here. I'm going to copy this link tag, the all.min.css. I copied it, and now I go into my public folder, into the index.html. I'm just going to clean out all of these comments. This just makes it look so bad. Now it looks really harmless, and I'm just going to add it right at the bottom. I'm going to add that FontAwesome link, and we can change the name of the application to React Project, just like this, or whatever you'd like. And if we save that, we now have FontAwesome CDN in our project. So we can close this file. So inside of this, I'm just going to start the server again, npm start, so we can see what we are doing. I'm going to close up all of these, so we should be on the home page. And this icon, I'm going to give a class name of FA-video. And if I were to save this, you will see a video icon pop up, this little video icon. Okay, so, and right after that we add the brand of our application. So I'm going to call this TV show search. You can name this whatever you'd like. So this is our brand for our navbar. So if I were to save this, it looks like this. We have the icon and then the TV show. Okay, so now inside of the nav links, inside of the nav tag still, we're going to create an unordered list. And this unordered list will contain the links of our application. So we have an ally, and inside of this one we'll have a link tag, a link component again, and this will link to the about page or the home page. So this is kind of redundant with this, but most application has this, so it links to the home page. So here I'm just going to say home, and then I'm just going to copy this down once again, and this will go to about, and I'm going to rename this to about. So now I have created my navbar. Now we're just going to add some styling to this to make it look much better than this. So I'm just going to place my index.css file right next to it like this. I'm going to close this up so we can see it hand on hand. So my navbar is this main div. So I want to style that now. So I'm going to name this navbar styles, and I'm going to say .navbar class. I want to give it some padding of 1 rem, and then a background color of a hex. This is matte black. So just like this, and if I save this and go back to my project, we can now see it changed the navbar to matte black. Okay, now I want to style this container. This container already pushes the text away from the side. You can see it from here, and it will be much clearer when we flex this to the side. Okay, now we want to style this navbar, this nav tag. So let's give it a class name of navbar __. So this is part of the BEM naming convention, and nav. So I'm going to take this class name and say dot navbar nav, and we're going to say display flex. So what this would do, it would push this to the side. Okay, I forgot to save this. So it would push this to the side like that. And then we want to justify content space between. So this would push the two different, so it would push this header brand and this unordered list away from one another. So if I were to save this and go back, you can see it pushed it all the way to the side. And then the last one is align items center. So this would just center them in the middle like this. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we're done with the navbar nav. So we want to go to the brand. So we can say class name equals nav __ brand, just like this. So we'll copy it over here. I like working with it like this side by side. You guys should just tell me if you find this confusing or if this is helpful, because now you can see what I'm working on as I go. So the navbar brand, I want to give the following style. So the actual H3, we do not want to do anything. We want to hit this link inside because this link has the text and the icon. So I'm going to navbar brand and then the A tag inside. So this link component would translate into the DOM. If we go to our inspector, we can see that this translates to an A tag and these two as well to an A tag. So we can say navbar __ brand A tag, and we give it a font size of 1.4 rem. We can give it a color of off-white. I like using an off-white, so I'm going to give it F4, 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 just like this. And if we were to save that and go back, refresh. Okay, something is, I once again forgot to save it on this side. If we go back, you can see that this changed to this off-white. And it still has that underline of the link. I just want to remove that. So I can say text decoration is equal to none. If I save it now, it looks like the proper brand of the navbar. So that is all good. Now we want to add a hover state to that navbar. So to that navbar brand. So if I copy that again with the A tag and I say hover and I change the color to this fancy green, I'm gonna say hash 3C948B. And if I save that and go back, we can see it gives it this nice hovering effect. Now we want to hit these unordered list links. So I'm gonna give this a class name of nav __ links, and each one of these is gonna have a class name of links underscore underscore link. I know it's a little bit confusing, but you get used to it. Links underscore underscore link. So the last part of the main parent class gets added in front, and then the name of this specific tag gets added there. So now if you want to style that, we can go nav underscore underscore links, just like that. And we want to display flex. So it would take this UL, and each one of these list items will be placed next to each other. So currently they are on top of each other, and we want to place them next to each other. If I were to save this, just like that, we can see it would be pushed next to each other like that, but that is still really terrible. So let's continue with the styling. So I want to give it a list style of none, so it would remove those bullet points. If I save that, we can see it removed the black bullet points. And then I want to align items to the center, just to give everything a proper alignment like that. Now I want to style each one of these allies and the A tags inside. So I'm going to say nav or links underscore underscore link, and then the A tag. So this is the li, and I want to hit this A tag inside there. I'm going to say display block. This would allow me to add padding at the top and bottom of the A tag. So I'm going to say padding of 1 rem. I'm going to give it a color of that same off-white again, just like that. And then I'm going to give it text decoration of none, and margin to the left, so they would just get separated from each other, of 0.5 rem. I'm going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid, and then that same black as the navbar. And the reason for this, it just avoids jumping when we add a hover state. So the last thing I want to do is add a font size to each one of these of 20 pixels. So if I'm done with that and I save and I go back, we can see that the navbar is getting shape now. It's starting to look more like the actual project. Okay, so we're almost done. We just have to add a hover state to these two. They currently don't have any hover state. And I'm just going to copy this style right over here. And on the A tag, if we hover, I want to add a border bottom of 1 pixel solid, and then once again this green color. And I want to change the color as well to that exact same color. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it here. Okay, so if we save that and go back, it now has this underlined hover. So it doesn't jump, and that's why we added a border right over here, because if we remove this border and save and go back, it would jump every time I hover over it. It would you can see that the navbar has this slight jump, and we don't want that, so we add the border. It's technically there, but not there. You can make it transparent if you would like as well. And we are done with the navbar. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to add the search bar, and the search bar is going to be inside of our home page component. So let's start with that next. Okay, so we can actually see the links working now. So if I were to go to the about page, we can see this part would change. If I say about, it would go to the about page, home page, about page, and this would go back to the home page as well. So let us start inside of our, we can close this up for now. And then let's go into, we haven't created that component yet. We want to create the search bar. So inside of our component, so this once again will be a component. I'm just going to close all of these up. We're going to still need the home page. We can close the navbar. Inside of the components folder, we create a new file called searchbar.js. So this would be a component, and this component would be imported inside of the home page. So we can say arrayfce, remove the React part, and give this a name. Class name is equal to search bar. And we can say this is the search bar. And when we're done with that, we can come to the home page, and here we can import that component. So I'm going to comment again components and import search bar from the components folder and the search bar file. And instead of saying this is the home page, we're going to add the search bar component in here. And if we save that and go back to our browser, we can see that it logs now this is the search bar. Okay, so let's start with, we can close the home page for now and the app, and we only have the search bar open, and let's open the index.css. We're going to start styling and creating our search bar. So I'm going to place this on the side again. So let's start with that. Okay, so inside of our search bar div over here, we're going to have a form, and this form will not have an action. We'll give this form a class name of search bar underscore underscore form, and then inside of the form we'll have an input and a button. So it's actually really simple. We have an input of text, and we give it a placeholder of search for TV show, just like this. If I can just type correctly, just going to reformat that quickly, and then we'll have a value, and this value will map to a piece of state. So let's import useState from React. So you can say import something from React, and this something is the useState hook. So just above our return, we'll create a const, and we will do array destructuring, and we'll say useState, and this useState will have a default value or initial value of just empty string, and then we can call this search term and set search term. Okay, so this value will map to the search term in our piece of state over there, and then we'll have an onChange handler. So onChange, so whenever this text box would change. So this is something in React called two-way binding, and then here we'll have an anonymous function which takes in an event parameter, and we will say set search term, which is this function we destructured up there, and we'll set that equal to the event dot target dot value. So it will take whatever we are typing and map it to this search term piece of state. So that is all for the input, and below the input we'll have a button, and this will have a class name of btn btn-block. So I like using this kind of bootstrappy vibe. It's just simple, and I'm not the best of CSS designers, so I like to use this basic type of style. So the button will have an onClick listener, and this onClick listener will map to a function called onSearchHandler, and we'll create that in just a second. And then this button will have text called search. So just below the piece of state, we can say const onSearchHandler and create a arrow function, and this function will take in event, and we'll say event dot prevent default, just like this. So this would just prevent the form from refreshing the page. So we can say console.log searching for term, and then plus the search term that was added into the input box, just like this. And if we save all of this, it should look really ugly. It's not pretty at all. So let's quickly style that. So let's quickly see if the two-way binding works. So if I would say hello and press search, we should see it console log over here. Searching for hello, term hello. Okay, so that all works. So let's start styling this. So right down here, we're going to search bar styles, just like this. Okay. So the first thing we're going to style is this outer div. We're going to give this outer div the class search bar, and we're going to style it as follows. We're going to give it a width of 100%, so it takes the entire container width, and we're going to give it a margin top of 2 rem, bottom of 2 rem, and the sides nothing. So if we save that and go back, we won't see anything now, but if we were to inspect it with our tools, we can see it goes all the way. So if I were to make this smaller, we can see it goes all the way from the beginning over here, so it just aligns those two things properly. Okay, the next thing we need to do is style this form and the input inside of it. So we're going to say search bar underscore underscore form, and the input, the direct input. And there's only one, but this is just better doing it like this. And we're going to give that input a width of 100%, so it stretches the entire container. We give it a padding inside of 10 pixels, top and bottom, and 17 pixels right and left. And then we'll give it a border of 1 pixel solid, and then that matte black. So the matte black is going to be kind of our dark primary color. So let's quickly add CSS variables for the colors so that we don't have to remember the hex codes. So we're going to say root like this, and then we're going to name it dark color, and we're going to add this 171717. So now we can use a var with this inside of it. So everywhere where we have this color, we can now go and say, let's quickly search for it everywhere. There's one and there's one. So I just pressed Ctrl D, and I'm going to change it to var, and then inside of the curly braces I'm going to say dark color. So now if I save, everything should be the same again. So this is how our input box looks now. Looks a little bit better. And then we can do the same for this fancy color over here. I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to call this our secondary color. So secondary dash color. Okay, and I'm going to paste that in here. So everywhere that I use that color, I can just say var secondary color. So over here, I'm using it, over there, and over there. So I'm going to say var dash dash secondary color, and it gives you IntelliSense on it, so it's pretty nice. If I save that, it should all still work. Okay, so the next thing I want to do in the input is add the background color and give this that off-white, so we can actually add the off-white to our colors as well. Off-white. So we're building our little own CSS framework by doing it like this. It's best practice, and like I feel like you learn quicker doing it this way. Okay, and we want to change all the places where we use that. So it's var off-white, just like that. Okay, so I want to change this background color to var off-white. I want to change the color of the inside of the text to var dark color, and the font size I want to set equal to 20 pixels. The outline width, so this is just if I were to select it, it's currently making this black line. I do not want that, so I'm going to say outline width and set it equals to 0. So now if I were to go back and click inside of it, it does not make that outline. I would add my own style for the outline now. Okay, so that is the input style. So now I want to style the input when I'm focusing inside of it. So I'm going to use the pseudo selector focus, and I'm going to style the border with 1 pixel solid and that fancy secondary color again. And now I'm going to add a box shadow. So I'm going to say box shadow is equal to 0, 0, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, RGBA, and this RGBA I'm going to insert here is the RGB value of this secondary color. So this would be 60, 148, 139, and then opacity value of 0.5. And if I save that and I go back to my application and I click inside of it, we can see this nice looking border box coming around it. Okay, so now we want to style this button. So this button has a utility class of btn and btn block. So I like to create my utility classes right below my container. So container is actually a utility class as well. So I'm gonna utils. Okay, so we have the container and then we have a dot button, and this dot button class will have some padding of 10 pixels and 17 pixels. I like to use this ratio when it comes to paddings and inputs because it just looks pretty standard. And I'm going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid and then that dark color we have in the variable. I'm going to give it a background color of that dark color as well. See, it just makes using colors much faster when we use variables. I'm going to give the text inside this off-white color. I'm going to give it a margin top and bottom of 1 rem and left and right of 0. I'm going to give it a font size of 20 pixels, and then I'm going to give it a cursor pointer. So if we hover over it, it would give us the pointer. So if we go back, we have this little button right over here. I want to let the button stretch all the way. That is why I have another utility class btn block. So right below the btn, I'm just going to quickly add its hover state. So btn, the button's hover state, it would just change the inner color to that of our secondary color. So if I save that and go back, it now gives us the exact same effect as these. And then I want to say btn dash block and say display block. So whatever component would get this btn block, so if it's a link or a tag, and the width is equal to 100% of its container. So now it is the entire size. So we can see that this input is stretching outside of its container. So this is the container and it is stretching outside. I actually pointed to the screen now. It stretches outside, and the reason for this is we need to set inside of our Axios here, we need to say box sizing is equal to border box. And if I save that and go back, we can see it is all inside of the container boxes. Okay, so with that done, we are basically done with the styling for the search bar. And one thing I want to do as well, if we submit something and there is nothing in the search term, I want to show an alert. So the next thing we'll do is create an alert item that would pop up above this search box if we were to click here without entering anything inside. So let's do that next. Okay, so now that we are done with the styling of the search bar, let's do the alert component. So the alert component, I'm going to close the index.css for now. It's also going to be a component, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by the alert component. So inside of our components, we'll create an alert.js file, and once again rafce, remove this from up here, call this div, give it a class name of, and here we're going to specify the curly braces, and then we're going to have backticks, and we're going to say it's going to have a class of alert, and then alert dash, and then some type, so $sign and some type, and this type we're going to extract or destructure from the props. So we're going to get type and some message, and this message will be displayed inside of here. We're going to have a icon, and this icon will have a class name of fas fa-info-circle, just like that. And then just outside of the icon we'll place our message we destructured from the props as well. So this is our entire alert component. So if we save this and go back to our search bar, right below this search bar div, we're going to add this alert component. I wonder if it's going to import it. No. Okay, so let's import it by ourselves. So we're going to say components, and we import the alert component from the, we are currently still in the components file, so it's just dot and then the alert, just like that. So if I were to save this and go back, we can see this weird thing loading up here. So there's currently nothing showing and we haven't styled it yet, but let me add, because we destructure the type and the message from the alert component. So we have to pass in some message, and this will be please enter something, and then the type is going to be of type info, or let's say danger. And if we save that, we'll be able to see the message being displayed now. So it says please enter something. So let's quickly style this to look like we want to. So once again, I'm going to close the search bar and just keep the alert open, and then open the index.css next to it like this. So now I want to style my alert component. So right at the bottom, I'm going to say alert styles, and this is pretty straightforward. It would look as follows. So this initial alert class will have the following styles. We can say alert and give it a padding of 10 pixels top and bottom and 17 pixels left and right. Then we can give it a font size of 20 pixels. We give it a border of 1 pixel, solid, and then variable of this dark color. And this would just be the default message or alert. And then a margin top and bottom of 2 rem, or 1 rem, excuse me, 1 rem, and left and right of 0. So if we save that and go back, now we can see it kind of makes a better shape. So this type we passed in, we want to specify a specific alert type. So let's specify 3 different types. We're not going to be using all 3, but this just shows you how to handle this type of situation. So we can say alert dash warning, and we can copy 3 of them. The next one is going to be alert danger. That's the one we're currently passing in. And then we have alert info. So all that we're going to change is in the alert, we're going to have background, and we set this equal to some color, and then we're going to have the color and set that equal to some color, and we're going to do this in all 3 of them. So we have 3 different types of alerts. Okay, so for the warning alert, we're going to have a color, a background color of F8 FFC4. It has this very light yellow, and then the border, excuse me, this has to be border. So I'm going to select this and say border, and then the border is going to be 1 pixel solid, and then a really dark yellow. So FFEE00, it will have this dark yellow. And then for danger, we'll have a background color of this really light red. So we'll have FFC4C4. And then the border will be solid red, so FF0000. And then for info, the background color will have this light blue, so we can say hash D7EAFE. And then the border will be a bluish color, so we can say hash 0523B7, just like that. And if we save this, we passed in a type of danger, so it would have this following look. So if we go back, we can see it giving us this type of output. So it's not displaying the border correctly. It's because I did not add the 1 pixel solid, just like that. And same here, 1 pixel solid, just like that. And if I save this and go back, now we have our proper alert. We don't want the alert to stay up here the whole time. So when we get to the context part, which should be really soon now, we can make this alert show dynamically. So with the alert done, I think we can start looking at working with the context and how to set up the context, and then we can start working with our data from the API. So let's see. We are done with the alert. So now we want to have this search bar, this onSearch handler, reach out to our context and populate our context with the search term and then the data that we get from the API. So let's quickly handle that next. Okay, so I like to handle the context in a systematic way. So what I usually do is I create inside of my source folder a folder called context, just like that. And inside of context folder, I create subfolders of all of my different global entities I want to keep state of. So for example, we're going to have state of the different shows that we get from the API, and then we're going to have context of the alerts that is displayed inside of our application. So inside of our context folder, I'm going to create 2 more folders, and the first one is going to be shows, and the next one is going to be alerts, just like this. And inside of these folders, I like to always create 3 separate files when it comes to setting up my context. So in the shows file, I'm going to start with that. In the shows file, I create the following 3 files: the shows context.js, the shows reducers.js, or just reducer.js, and then the last one is capital letter show state, shows state.js. So this is my 3 files I usually use to set up my context, and then I do the exact same in the alerts. So I'm just going to close this up quickly, and then inside of the alerts I do the exact same. I say alert context.js, alerts plural, doesn't really matter, but just stick to the file folder name, and then alerts reducer.js, and then the last one is capital letter alerts state.js, just like this. Now we have all of our files for the context, and I will get to explain all 3 of them now. So inside of our shows context, we set up our context, we create our context. So we say import something from React. So if you've watched my previous video on context and useReducer, then this format will be exactly the same. And here I'm going to extract the create context from React. Then I create a variable called shows context and set this equal to the create context we just extracted from above. And then we export default this variable show context, just like this. So this is a really simple 3-line file, but this is how I usually do it. And then I go to my show state, and in here is where I create my action handlers for dispatching to my reducer. But before I do that, I usually create a constant types. And this gives you quicker importing and reference capabilities. So I'm going to say types.js, and inside of here I'm going to have two separate types. I'm going to have types for the show context and types for the alerts context. So under the shows, I'm going to export const, and the first type is going to be search underscore shows. This is just convention to keep it in capital letters. And then the exact same thing in string, I'm going to place search shows. This just helps avoid unnecessary spelling, so you can easily just import it. And then the next one is export const set underscore loading, and set this equal to the string of the exact same. Then I'm going to export const set single underscore show, copy this over again. So this is just the different types, and you'll see where I use this in just a second. And then the last one is clear underscore single underscore show. Copy. If you've worked with Redux before, I like to follow the exact same structure because it's just easy and it follows best practices. So we can say export const for under the alerts, and we can say set alert and set that equal to the exact same string. Export const, and we can remove alert just like this. So using context is really repetitive, but I hope you find this helpful. So now I'm done with my types file, so I can close this completely now. And inside of my state, so all of the states would have the same structure. So the shows state, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to import from React the useReducer hook. So the useReducer and the useContext really makes magic together. And here I'm going to import shows context from the same folder, and then I'm going to import the reducer, so shows reducer from the same folder. And I name these in capital letters because later I'm going to use lowercase letters. You'll see in just a moment. And here is the import of the types that I was talking about. So we go outside of the folder and into the types file. And here I can import the specific types. So the search shows, the set loading, the set single show, and the clear single show, just like that. So now I have all of the types. So when we create this shows state component, we do it the exact same way as if we wanted to create a normal component. So we can say RAFCE and then just remove this part right here. And instead of returning this div, I'm going to be returning this context I imported up here. So I'm going to say shows context dot provider. If you don't know what I'm doing here, I would suggest go watching my previous video on useContext and useReducer and how to use that in global state. So I'm going to add the props here, and inside of this provider, I'm going to add the props.children. So any component that is wrapped with this provider will have access to the values that we pass in here. So these values are our global state we're going to create now for our shows. And this will be the following. So we can say const initial state is equal to an object that contains different fields. So we have the shows, which will just be an array. We'll have the single show, just like this, which would be an empty object, and we'll have some loading boolean flag, which would be set to false. So now I want to add all of these state items to my values. And how do I do that? Well, first of all, I have to use this useReducer by saying const, and once again array destructuring, and setting it equal to useReducer. And this useReducer, if you hover over it, we can say it takes in some reducer and some initializer, some initial state. So I'm going to add my reducer I imported from up here, which is show reducer, and then this initial state I created up here. So now I destructure the state and some dispatch function. This dispatch function will be used to send different types to our reducer to manipulate our state. And now we can pass in this shows as state.shows, and the single show as state.single show. So it gets it from the state here, and it is pulled down into the values. And then the last one is loading as state.loading. Okay, so now we have all our values pulled out from our state. So now we want to create our action creator. So this would dispatch to our reducers. So I'm going to create the first function, const called search shows just like this, an arrow function, and this will be an async function because we're going to be using Axios. This is where we're going to start requesting to our API endpoint. So we're going to say dispatch, and this is going to be of type set loading. So the set loading will basically just go into our reducer and set the loading to true, so we will be able to see the spinner load on our screen. And here we want to make a request with Axios. So we don't have Axios package yet, so let's stop our server and say npm I Axios, just like this. And once we're done installing it, we can pull it up at the top here. So I'm just going to do that so long. I'm going to say import Axios from Axios, just like this. Now I can make my asynchronous request in this function. So I can say const and then destructure whatever I get from Axios. So I can say axios.get, and this is where we're going to make a request to our API shows endpoint. So I'm just going to copy that endpoint. You can copy it down right here. So I'm just going to add this to backticks, place backticks around here, because we're going to make this a dynamic query. Whatever is after this query, we're going to get that string from our function. So we're going to say search term and place that right in over here. So now we are making a request to our API /shows, and then we pass in some query, and this query we're going to get from our search component later. So then we destructure, we get a result, and this result will have a data property. So when we get that data property, we want to dispatch to our reducer the type of search shows, and then we add a payload of that data. So this data will be an array that contains 10 of the shows that has this search term in it. Okay, so with that done, we are done with the search shows action creator. First, let's do the reducer. So inside of our shows reducer, we're going to do the following. We're going to import those types once again from outside of this file types, and we want to import the exact same things as up here. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it down here. Sorry if I'm going a little bit too fast. The video is just becoming a bit long, and this is kind of tedious, and if you already know how to do this, this kind of stays the same. So I'm going to save this down here, and before I forget, I need to pass this function down into the values of my provider. So you can see it makes it this orange yellowish color. So now I have this function available in my context. I'm going to save, and in here I want to say const shows reducer. I'm just creating a function, an arrow function, and this arrow function takes in two properties. It takes a state and some action, and we're going to make a switch statement with this action, and we're going to, on this action, look at the type. So this type comes from the type we dispatch right over here. So that is why we use this string constant identifiers, because we use it both in the state dispatch and the reducer switch statement. So here we can say case, if it is set underscore loading, we want to manipulate the state. So this state we get here by spreading the state and then setting the loading property equals to true. Okay, I'm just going to take these orange lines away by saying default and returning the state, just like this. I want to export this reducer, so I can say export default and then paste that in right there. Okay, so now we have our first action creator manipulating the state. So this just sets the loading to true. So it's this part right over here. We dispatch set loading, and then it sets the loading to true, and then we make our Axios request, we get our data, and then we dispatch the data into the payload, and this is the next thing we need to check. So we can say case search shows, we want to return, we spread our state once again, and now inside of our state, if you remember, we have this shows array. So we want to set that shows array equal to the action.payload. So what do I mean by this action.payload? Well, in here, when we make the Axios request and get the data, we send this object that has some payload, and this payload has the data. So we set the action, which is sent, payload of that document equal to the show. So now we populate the shows with the array we get from the API. So once we are done with that, we set loading to false. So now our spinner, when we use our spinner, will know that the data is correctly saved in our state and it is no longer loading. So we can save this, and now we only have set single and clear single. So I'm going to leave that for now. Let's make this function work and see what we get by doing this. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go into my search bar, and here is where we're going to use context. So we're going to say use context, and then we're going to import some context. What context are we going to import? We're going to import this show context. So we're going to say import show context from outside of the file, inside of the context folder, inside of shows, and then we get the shows context. Now we use this hook. So we can say below the state, we can say const shows context and set that equal to useContext, and inside of useContext we pass the context we imported. So now we can destructure from here. We can actually do it directly in here. We can destructure the following things. We want the shows, we want the search shows. So in our state we have this search shows, we want the shows and the loading, just like this. And we actually, let's see, the search shows is going to be called from here, and then the shows are going to be loaded, so we don't need these shows, we only need the search shows, and we don't need the loading. So we only need that function pulled out from the shows context. Let's rename that to shows so it's just correct terms. So now we're going to use this function when we call this on search handler. Instead of console logging the search term, we're going to say search shows and pass it in. If you remember, the search shows need a search term, so we pass it in this search term, just like this. Okay, so now basically our application is making a request to our API. So let's check this out. But first, in order to see what we get, this data that we make a request to, I'm just going to console log it so we can see what it looks like. So we won't be able to see anything visually yet. So I'm going to say npm start. And now if I go to my console, okay, let's see what's the problem here. So we are not able to see this context yet because we need to wrap, if you remember, we have to wrap some component, which is going to be our app component, to get access to these values. So let's go into our app.js, and I actually do it in my index.js, and here I'm going to import my states. So I'm going to import shows state from, and then I navigate into the context, and then shows, and then the shows state. And now I need to wrap my entire application with this shows state, just like this. If I save now I should have access to this alerts right over here. So let's try it now. If I refresh, okay, we can see it a little bit more clearer now. So now if I would just search something here, say girls, and search, we get an array of 10 data pieces right over here. So this is awesome. Sorry about that little mistake. I hope you followed what I said there. So in order for us to have access to the show context by using this useContext hook, we first have to wrap our entire application with the state. So in my index.js, I wrapped it with the show state, so this component right over here. Okay, so now we have access to that. So now what we want to do is when we go to our home page, we want to render all 10 of these searches that came back. These searches are now inside of our reducer. So it basically, the workflow went, we got the data, we dispatched the data to our reducer, the reducer got the data and it added to our state. So now inside of our home page, we want to render those components. So let's do that next. Okay, so now I am here inside of the home page and I want to have access to the state. So let's get access to the state by doing the following. We import that useContext hook from React, useContext, and then we need to import that context we want access to, so we can say import shows context from context shows useContext. Now we can use the hook by saying const shows context is equal to the useContext hook, and then we pass in the shows context we imported. A lot of contexts flying around. So then we can destructure from this shows context the loading and the shows. So if you remember from our state, we had the loading and the shows. So now we want to render if we are not loading. We want to render if, okay, so if we are loading, so if loading is true, we want to render a h2 that just says loading for now. Later we'll make this a spinner. Else we want to render this inside of a div. I'm going to place this in a div, and then I'm going to map through the shows. And here I'm going to say for each show, I just want to render h3 where I display the show dot name. So I'm actually going to rename this first show to item. So I want the item dot show dot name. So if I save this and I go back, if we search for girl, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have the 10 results coming from our API. So this warning just means for each one of these maps we need to pass a key, but we're going to make this a component. It's going to be called list item. So let's quickly create the list item component next. Okay, so let's create that list item. We're going to start in our components folder. We create a new file called list item.js, just like this. Okay, once again, RACE. I'm going to speed up the development a bit. Okay, so we're going to import the link component from React Router DOM. To make this entire list item clickable. Okay, and then we're going to wrap it in this link. We're going to give this link a direction or a route to link to, and this will be that single page or single show page. So inside of our app.js, we route here to single show and then some ID, so it will route to that. So inside of list item we go slash single show slash and then some ID. This ID will destructure from the props of this component, and we'll receive the following props in this component. We'll get the image, we'll get the name, we'll get the rating, and then that specific ID of this component. And then we'll give this link a class name to style it, a class name of list item. Then inside of this link we'll have an image tag that has a source of the image that was passed through. We'll give the alt, we'll just set that equal to the name that was passed through, and then we'll have a div that contains the bottom of the card's info. So imagine this looking like a card, and the info will be in this div. So we'll say list item underscore underscore info. Okay, then we'll have a h4. This h4 will contain the name that was passed through in the props. We'll give this h4 a name, a class name of list item underscore underscore, this should actually be info name. Then we'll have one more h4, and this h4 will have a class name of info underscore underscore rating. And then in here we'll pass in the rating that we got from the props. So this is how our list item will look like. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to my home page, and now I'm going to bring it in here. So once again, under components, I'm going to import list item from components / list item. Now I can pass it, instead of this h3 here, I'm going to pass the list item, just like this. So this list item needs 4 props to be passed. First, it needs that special key that allows React to render it correctly. So we can say items or item dot show. So this is in the show part of the JSON data that gets returned. So item dot show dot ID. I'm just going to put it down here. And then we'll need some ID, and this will be the exact same as the one above. Then we need an image and a name. So I'm gonna say image and name. Okay, so when we pass in the image, we're going to check item dot show dot image. And we're first going to check that this field actually exists in our return document, because I checked that some of the documents does not have images. So we first have to make sure that this field exists, and if this field exists, we can do a ternary operator and say, okay, then I want to take the image. So I just copied that part. I'm going to take the image, and inside of that image document there was a medium or original size image, and then I just want to take the medium sized image. Else, if I don't find this image field, I want to paste in a default image. So this default image I just got from the internet. You can just Google any like no image found picture or something like that. So this is basically just a link to a default image. And now for the name, we can pass in item.show.name. All of them has names because that is what it's queried on. And then the last thing is the rating. The rating, once again, we first have to check that it has a rating. Otherwise, we have to do something else. So item.show.rating.average. So we first have to check average, just like this. We first have to check this and make sure it actually is not equal to null. So if you play around with the API a bit, you'll see what I mean by checking these things first. So some of them does not have a rating, it just has null in it. So we first have to check that this is true, and if it is true, then inside of the rating you can pass through the rating. Else we just want to pass in a string that says no rating, just like this. And we can save this. And now if we were to go back and view our application, if we were to search something like girls and search, we saw that loading part of the application pop up, and that was due to this H2 being loaded. So that means the loading was still false, or the loading was still true, and we showed this. And the moment when the loading is turned to false, when the shows is done loading into the reducer, we can map through it and list it out. So we get this following result. So now this images is kind of nice because it's the correct size. So let's quickly style our list items to look like we want them to look. Okay, so I'm going to close this one up and then open the index.css. I'm going to place it next to it like this once again. If you can just get it, there you go. Now all the way down at the bottom, I'm going to comment list item styles. and then I gave this list item this A tag link we placed around a class name of list item. So I'm going to give it a text decoration of none. This would just remove the blue lines. Then I'm going to give this box or this card a width of 210 pixels. I'm going to give it a background color of the off-white variable. I'm going to give it some fancy box shadow of 0, 0, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and then an RGBA of 20, 23, and 28, and then 1 opacity. And then I'm going to say right at the back, I'm going to say comma, 0, 3 pixels, 1 pixel, 0, and then the exact same RGB value. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in down there. Then I'm going to give all of these boxes a margin of top and bottom of 1 rem, and then on the sides for now I'm going to give it 0. Then I want cursor pointer, and because this is a link item, because it's an A tag, it makes weird when you place things inside and you don't give it a display of inline block. So I'm going to say display inline block, just like this. So now if we save this and we were to go back to our application, we can see that the boxes have taken this shape. So we have one weird large image down here, and this is the default image that I have chosen from the internet. So let's quickly just style default images. So I'm just going to go all the way up just above the utils class. I'm going to say images should all have a width of 210 pixels. It should have a height of 295 pixels. And then I'm just going to say object fit and set it to cover. And if I save this and go back, we can see that we have these card looking list items now. So let's continue with the styling. So the next thing I want to do is give it this list item some hover state. So this hover state is basically just going to make it almost look like it increases in size. So we're going to say transform and then scale. And then scale I'm going to set to 1.03. And if I save this and go back, we can see if I hover over, it gives it this jumpy effect. So this is pretty nice. Okay, so the next things we want to style is the list item info container. So we want to say list item underscore underscore info and set that equal to a color of the dark variable, and we want to text align to the center. If we save that, we can look it up and we can just see it pushed everything to the center and made it this black. Now we want to style the info underscore underscore name and give it a font size of 1 rem and some padding of 5 pixels all the way around. And then for the info rating, so info underscore underscore rating, we want to give it a color of var, that fancy secondary green, and then a padding of 5 pixels all around. And if we were to save that and go back to our application, we can see that the styling of the cards or the list items is starting to get there. Now, I do not want them to be this close to one another, so I'm going to style their containing div. So this containing div right here, I'm going to style and make it display off grid. So let's quickly do that. So inside of our home component, so I'm going to close this one up. Inside of our home component, we have this surrounding div that surrounds all of our list items. So I'm going to give this div a class name of homepage underscore underscore list, and I'm going to give this the following style. So just save here. I'm going to go right down below and say homepage styles, and I'm going to give this homepage list a display of grid, and I'm gonna say grid template columns. I'm gonna repeat 5 times and 1 fragment. And if I were to save this and go back, we can see it has pushed them slightly outwards. Now we can see that there is a slight gap here in the sides. So this side is completely against the grid and this side has this little gap. And the way we can fix this now is with this margin right over here. So the actual list item does not have margin on the side. So we just want to center this, so we can say margin auto. And if we go back now, we can see that it is all well centered in their grid template column. So now it looks more like we would like it to look. It has this nice hover state. The next thing we need to do is we can quickly handle the alert context. So let's do that next. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna close all of this up. Then I'm gonna go into my alert context folder. I'm just gonna open up all of these files. First, let's start off with the alert context. So this is boilerplate, just like previously. Import create context from React. Then we create a constant called alert context alerts. Let's say alerts context, and set this equal to create context. Then we export default the alerts context variable we created up here and save. So we're done with the alerts context. Now we can jump into the state. In the state, we import our useReducer hook, useReducer. Then from React, then we import our context, so we can say alerts context from alerts context. Then we import the reducer, so alert reducer from alerts reducer. Then we need to import our types from outside of the file in the types file, and we can import the set underscore alert and then the remove underscore alert. And then the last thing we need to do is run RAFCE, create that component. We can remove the import of React, and then instead of rendering or returning this div, we can return the alert context, so the alerts context dot provider, and this provider will have some value, and we're just going to add the props to this component and pass in props dot children. So anything that is wrapped with this component will have access to these values. So the state of the alerts is going to look like this. Initial state is just going to be equal to null initially. Then we're going to have a action creator called set alert, and this will be a function that receives some message and some type. Then we will dispatch. Okay, but before we can dispatch, we need to use reducer. So we can say const and destructure with use reducer and pass in our alerts reducer, and then the initial state. Then we can pass in the state as alert. So we want to look in the state under alert, and then we just pass in the state because the entire state will contain that specific alert. And then we need to pass down this function of set alert, just like this. We destructure from this array the state and dispatch. So this state is going through the reducer and then back in here to be wrapped around. Okay, so in this set alert, we're going to dispatch a type of set alert, and then we're going to give this alert a payload of an object, and this object will contain the message that was sent to the function and then the type that was sent. And then the last thing we need to do is call a set timeout so that the alert just displays on the screen for a few seconds and then disappear. So we're going to set timeout to 5,000 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds. And then once that 5 seconds is reached, we want to dispatch once again a type of remove alert. So this is it for the alert state. So now we can close this one up and go into the reducer. We can import all of the types at the top, just like this. We have the set alert and the remove alert. So this is going to be a pretty simple one. We create our alerts reducer function. This function will take in some state and some action, and then we export default that alerts reducer, just like that. And in here we'll have a switch statement that checks the action dot type field. Oh, not that, action dot type, and we'll have a case of set alert where we will just set the alert. So we'll return the action dot payload into payload, right, like that. And then the next one will be the remove alert, and we'll return just null. And then the default case for the switch statement, we'll just return the state. So what will happen here is if we receive a type of set alert, then we just add the action payload that contained the message and the type. So our new state will be an object that has a message and type. And then if we remove, we just set it back to null. So this is it for our context for the alert. Now we just have to wrap our application with this context. So we can say import alerts state, just like this, from context, the alerts folder, the alert state, and then just below the shows state we can add alerts state and then wrap it around the app, just like that. Now we should have access to both the set alert and the alert state. So in my components folder, I'm going to go into the search bar because this is where the alert component resides. So I'm going to import the alerts context from the context folder, the alerts folder, and then the alerts context file. We already have useContext, so we can just use it down here again. I'm gonna destructure directly out of the useContext. You can do it for the one up here, but it's good to see how you can do it both. So here I'm going to pass in the context I just imported, and I'm going to destructure the alert and the set alert. So where will we be using these two? Well, in our onSearch handler, so the search bar, when we press the search button, we first want to check that the state that is two-way binded to this input contains an actual value. So we'll have, just before we use this search shows, we can do an if check to see if the search term is equal to an empty string. We want to set an alert. So what does the set alert function that we imported here take? It takes in some message. We're going to say please enter something, and then a type which is of type danger. And if this is not true, so there's actually something in the search term, then we first want to search. So just like that. Now we need to use this alert. So we want to render this alert component conditionally. So if there is an alert in our state, so if it is not equal to null, we want to render this alert component. So I'm just going to cut that out here and paste it in. Else we want to render nothing. But we do not pass in the messages hard-coded like this. We're going to say the actual alert that is set in the state has a message field and a type field. So we can say alerts.message and alerts.type, just like that. So if I were to save this and go back to my application and we refresh here, we can see that the alert component disappeared now. So now if I just were to search something, it would pop up everything and the alert component is not there. But now if I were to refresh all kept on that page and I don't type anything in here and just press search, it would pop up the alert, say please enter something, and then after 5 seconds it will disappear like that. So that is the alert component done. So we can finish now by making the single page work. So we can see that this links to some single page. It links to single show and then some ID. If we click on something else, we have single show and a different ID. So let's quickly create this page, and then we have the about page, and then we are done. Then we're going to deploy it to Netlify. So stick with me. I know this is a long one, but let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. The first things we need to do before we do the single page is just finish the show's reducer and state. So we can see here we still have these two dispatches to handle. So we have search shows, and then we need one for get single show. So we can create a function called get single show, and this will receive some ID, and this once again will be an asynchronous function. And what we'll do here is basically when we get to the single shows page and we were to refresh the page or route to that page, we want to call this function in the useEffect so that it would load the details of that show. So how this is going to look is as follows. We are going to dispatch of type set loading. This is just for our spinner once again. And then we want to do an Axios request again. So we're going to await Axios.get, and this endpoint is a different endpoint. It's still the same API, but this endpoint will give us the specific show. So we'll have API tvmaze.com and then shows, and then we pass in some ID. And this is the ID that we get from this function. So we can add that here. And data, extract the data from this. Then we can dispatch a type of set underscore single show, and we pass it a payload of that data. So we can console.log and see how this data looks like. So console.log data, and if we save this, we are not done yet. We have to pass this function into our values, into our provider. And the last function we need to create is to clear the single show. So clear single show is equal to a function, and this would just dispatch a type of clear single show. Then we can pass that down into our functions, our providers right here, and save. So now we can go into our reducer and handle this dispatches. So we're already handling the set loading. Now we just need to import the set single show and the clear single show. So in the case of set single show, we just want to return the state as it is so that we don't lose our shows array. And then we set the single show, I believe we named it. Go back to the state, single show, which is just an empty object. We set single show equal to the action.payload. Just gonna make sure it's capital S, like this. And then we can set loading to false. because remember we first set the loading to true by doing that, down here by doing that, and then we set it false when it's done. The last one is the case to clear single show, and here we will just return spread the state and set the single show field back to a empty object, just like that. And we can save this. Now we are done with the shows state overall. We have brought them into the provider. Now we can go to our single shows page and start by building it up here. So this page is going to have a few caveats that we're going to have to check in order for it to render correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import a few hooks. I'm going to import the useEffect hook, useEffect hook, and the useContext hook from React, just like this. Then I want to import the context. We're going to import the shows context from the context folder, shows, and then shows context. And then we want to create that context in our component. So we can say const shows context is equal to the useContext hook, and then we pass in that shows context. Copy this and pass that in here. Now I want to actually destructure directly out here, and what we're going to need here is the get single show method. So if we go back to our state, we can see we called it get single show. So get single show method, we want the actual single show that is loaded into the state, and then we want the loading variable. So in our useEffect, we can now run that get single show by creating a function and passing in our dependencies array. And here I can say get single show, and then we need to pass it some ID. So where do we get the ID? So if you remember, if I click here, it passes in the single show route, and then it passes the ID into the route. So we can extract that ID from our props by saying match. So in here we can pass match dot params, and then whatever we called that ID. So in our app.js where we route, we call that variable ID. So you can just pass in ID, just like that. So now it would go to the endpoint and search and populate our state. And just to get rid of this squiggly line, I'm just going to say ESLint.disable next line, just like that. So now every time this page loads, it should go and fetch our single show data. And I console logged it down here, so we should be able to see that. And here we can see this show being printed out. So it's this show with an ID of 139. Okay, so let's continue. So the next thing I want to do is actually start building my single page. So I'm going to remove that and then just place an empty fragment tags like this. So I firstly want to check once again if this is still loading. So I don't want this page to display empty data and then randomly just populate it. So I'm going to check if the loading variable is set to true. I want to display h2 that says loading. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to display h2 that says loading ... We'll change this to a loader in just a second. And then I want to, if this is not the case and it's done loading, I want to render a div, and this div will contain our single show. So we can give this a class name of single show, just like this. And in here we're going to want an image. We're going to want another div. This div will contain all of the single show info, so we can give this a class name of single show underscore underscore info. And then in here we'll have a few things. We'll have a header, which is an h1 that contains the show's title. So let's populate these things as we go. The image source will be of this single show that we got in the state. So we first have to check this single show dot, if we remember how this looks, we got the single show and then we have the image field. We have to check that that image field does exist before we just populate it. So we can say the image field, and if it exists, we would like to add the single show dot image dot medium. So this is the exact same as the previous home page. Else we want to add this at the home page. We gave it this default image. We want to take that default image once again, copy that, or whatever you used, and then just paste that in right over here. The alt for this image, we'll just set that equal to single show dot name. It will always have a name. I'm just going to let this format itself like that. So we have our image tag right over here, and that is set. Then we have the div with the class with the info, and in the h1 we want to render the single show dot name, just like that. And the next thing we want to do is go and check. If we check here, we can see it has a field called genres, and this genres is an array, and we want to display each of those genres in its own span. So we're going to do this as follow. We're going to say single show dot genre. So we're going to check if this actually exists, genres. And if this exists, we use the double ampersand, and then we say single shows dot genre dot map. So we want to map through all of the genres. So for each genre, we want to render a span. So I'm going to add a span here, and we want to give this span a key, and this key can just be set to equal to the genre text, because that would differ from each span. And then in here we want to render that genre text, just like this. And we want to give this span a class name of single show underscore underscore genre. Okay, so we're done with that part. The next part we want to do is add all of the separate fields. So we have a p tag, and this p tag will have a strong tag inside that contains the status of this TV show, and then we'll load the following. We'll say this single show dot status. So if this field exists, we want to add the single show status. And the reason I'm doing this checks because when I built this application previously today, it gave me errors when it loaded. So you first have to check that it exists and then add it to your p tag. And then we're going to have another p tag. I'm just going to copy this one down. This is going to be the rating tag, and in here we want to check if the rating exists. So we can say status check if the rating exists. If it exists, we want to add the rating, and inside of the rating, if we go back, we can see here rating is a document which has an average field. So we can go rating.average like that. Else we just want to load a string that says no rating. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is the official site. So we once again can copy down this p tag and call this official site, and here we want to check if there is an official site on this single show. And if there is an official site, we want to load a tag containing, we want to load, so we have to do the brackets like that. We want to load an a tag just like that, that has an href, and set this href equal to the single show dot official site. And in order to let this A tag not redirect our page but open a new page, we're going to say target is equal to underscore blank, and then rel, we'll set this equal to no referee, just like this. And inside here we can paste that single show dot official site link to make it look just to show the text of the site. And then if it does not have a single site, we can just say no official site, just like that. And then the last thing we need to do is add the description. So if we look at the description here, it's under summary, we can see that it contains HTML tags. So we don't want to display those HTML tags. So I got a method from a website, Geeks for Geeks, to remove these HTML tags. So once again, I'm going to render a p tag, and in here I'm firstly going to check if the single show dot summary exists, and if it exists, I want to use the next function to add it. So this function will look as follow. I'm just going to copy it in here because it's just quicker to do it that way. This function I called remove tags, and it accepts the text and it checks a few things, and then it returns the text without each of the HTML tags. So this is some regular expressions. I don't know exactly what it does, but it works. So in here at the single show summary, we first call remove tags, and then we pass it that summary. So we can say single show dot summary, just like this. So now we are done with the building of this single page. So we can save this and go back to our application, and we can see it all being rendered out correctly. So here we can see the HTML tags was removed. So if I were to go back and click on another one, we can see a different single page being loaded. So let's quickly style this page. So I'm going to close all of this up, just going to keep this open the index.css, put this next to it like that, and now I'm just going to style them. So right below I'm going to single show page styles. Okay, so let's style that quickly. We'll style the single show div, so this one right over here, and we'll give it a style of display flex, so that these two, so this div and the image will sit next to one another. So if I were to save that, you would actually see that happen like that. And then I want to give it a margin of 2 rem, so it's not directly at the top, so it has this little gap here. Okay, the next thing I want to do is style the single show image, so the direct image, so it would be this image being loaded here. I want to push it away from, I want to give it a margin right of 2 rem. So basically what this does, it just pushes the text and the image away from each other. Okay, then I want to have single show and then the underscore info, so it's this part, this div right here. I want to give that a style. I want to give the p tags a style of margin, 1 rem top and bottom, and 0 left and right. So if I save that, you can see it just separates them out like that. So it just automatically gives it a better look. So I am seeing that it is not rendering my genres correctly. So we'll get back to that in just a second. Or is it loading it? No, it's not loading it. Okay, so now I want to style those genres. So single show underscore genre, just like this. I want to display it inline block for the spans. I want to give it a border radius of 15 pixels. I want to give it a margin of top of 0.5 rem, right 1 rem, bottom 0.5 rem, and then to the left of 0. Padding top and bottom of 10 pixels, same as the buttons and the inputs, and then a background color of that fancy green, secondary color, and then the color of the text inside should be of this off-white. So if I were to save this and go back, it's not loading that correctly, so let's quickly check what is going on. So it does have a genres field. So let's see, single show genres, just like that, and save. If we go back now, we should see it pop up like that. Okay, so this is our single show page. So this is how it looks for each one of them. So let's quickly do our spinner. You can see that spinner does not look nice because it just says loading. So let's quickly handle that. So inside of my folders, I have this spinner GIF. I'm just going to copy this and paste it into my React project, the source folder, and inside of my components, I'm just going to paste it in here. I'm going to rename it to spinner, just like that. I'm going to close that. So if I go back to my folders, inside of my component, I would see this spinner right over here. It has a background of white. So in order to do this, we're going to create a spinner component. So in our components, I'll create another file called loader.js, and we can just say rafce, create the component, and instead of importing React, I want to import that spinner. So I can say spinner from underscore spinner.gif. And in here, all I want to do is add the spinner in an image tag. So in here, I can just say the source of the image tag will be that imported spinner, and the alt will just be text that says loading. So if this seems to fail, it would just display loading. I'm going to give this loader a class name of loader, and we'll style that quickly. In our index.css, we'll go all the way at the top. It doesn't really matter, you can put it at the bottom as well. I just like grouping it under my utils. So here I'm going to say .loader, and I'm going to give it a margin top and bottom of 2 rem, and the size will be auto, just like that. And if we go back to our application, actually no, we first have to add it where we used to say loader or loading. We have to add this loader now. So where do we do this? Everywhere. In our home page, we have this thing right over here. So under components, I'm going to import the loader component again from the components folder, the loader file, and then instead of this h2, I'm going to add the loader, just like that. And then the single page here as well, I'm going to import a component, import the loader from the components folder, and then the loader. And instead of showing this h2, just going to add the loader and save. So if we go back to our application now and we were to search for something, go in here. Now it's so fast, so let's quickly just say if it's not loading, to just see the loader in here. We can see the loader being loading here. So I want to center this to the middle. So in order to do that, we have to go to the style and add at the styles a display of blocks. So we can say display block. And if we do that and we go back, it should center it in the middle. Why is it not centering it? We want this image tag. Okay, so we want the image tag to be centered into the middle. So we can actually just say image like this. And if we go back, now we can see it's in the middle like this. So our application is starting to form nicely. If we search for girls, okay, it's obviously going to keep on loading. So we can just negate this back to just loading. And bam. Voila. Okay, sometimes it's really fast, so you don't really see the spinner. If I were to search here Silicon Valley, you can see the spinner showing up. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is the about page. I'm literally just going to paste that in because it's just a list of things, and then we'll do the deployment. Okay, so let's navigate into the about page. We can close all of this up, just open the index.css for a few styles, and then the about page, and in here I'm just going to copy and paste the return. So I'm going to be removing this, and then I'm just going to copy it from here. You can pause the video and just add this to your about page. So I'm going to save this, and this should look like this. It's really ugly. We'll just quickly give it styles. I'm once again just going to copy and paste the styles because this is not really important. It's just to finish the application so it looks like the demo. Okay, now I'm going to go into my index.css way at the bottom. I'm going to paste in about page styles, and then I'm just going to copy in the about page styles. It's really simple styles. You can pause the video and go through it. Just gonna close this up so you can see it more clearly. Paste it all in like this. And if I were to save this and go back to my application, the about page is now styled in this format. So okay, if you made it this far, congratulations. I will definitely try and make shorter videos in the future. This is just a special for my 200 subscribers. And the last thing, and to take this project home, we'll deploy it to Netlify. Okay, so let's deploy this project to Netlify. So I created my Netlify account here. I have directed to the Sites tab. You have to have an account to be able to do this. So let's go back to our code. And first off, we are going to create a setup file in our root directory. So netlify.toml, and in here we just say build, and then publish is equal to the build. We can save this, we can save this like this, and then close that up. And then we need to install the Netlify CLI tool. So we can say npm i-g Netlify-CLI, just like that. I already have this installed, so I'm not going to do this again. But if you're on Mac or Linux, you have to put sudo in front of this. But once that is complete, we can run the npm run build command to build our React app. And if we do this, we'll get a build folder right over there. And this is what we will be deploying to Netlify. Okay, we can close this up, and once that is complete, we can run Netlify init, and this is going to prompt us with a few questions. Do you want to create this without a Git repository for now? We're going to say yes. Team, that's the only team. My site name is optional. This has to be random. This has to be unique. So I'm just going to leave this out for now, and it will generate its own name. And here it created the Netlify file and the admin URL. So if I go back to my page here and refresh, we will see this randomly generated name. If we click on it, we can see site has not yet been deployed. And all we have to do now, if you want to set up your domain names and so forth, you can do that. And the only thing we need to do now is, if you have environmental variables, you can put them in here, edit variables, and add it in here. But we don't have any, so we can just go directly to the deploying of this site. So in our command line, we just run Netlify deploy -- and then the prod flag like this. And if we do that, it will deploy to production. So it's really easy. And then if we go back, we'll see the deploy is live. And if we refresh this, this would be green now. We can see it is live. So if I were to open this, we can view our React project. So let's see if there's any errors. This is the about page. If we search for girls, the loader comes up. Let's see if there's any errors. Okay, so there is our error. We need HTTPS has been blocked. Okay, so let's quickly fix that. I'm going to go back. Going to go inside of my context, the alerts, the shows, and in here I'm just going to add HTTPS and HTTPS and save that. Let's see if this works. I'm going to rerun the deploy to prod. I actually have to rerun the build, so I can rerun the build. It would recreate my build. I actually have no idea if this is going to work. And then we can redeploy to prod. Okay, so now I'm going to refresh this, open it up again, and Silicon Valley, just like that, and we can search, and it worked. So everything seems to be working fine. We can view the page, and this is awesome. So sorry about that little deployment bug. All I had to do is make sure that this said HTTPS, and as well as this one HTTPS, not just HTTP. And then I just rebuilt my project, and now we have a live React project on Netlify. So I really do hope you enjoyed this little video. It's not actually a little video, it's a big video. I really hope you'd enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. And if you did like it, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. If there's anything you did not understand, I will get back to you as soon as possible. And if there's any future videos you'd like, then just leave that down below as well. And thank you very much for my 200 subscribers. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.